Cycling with David Salmon, cycling in Normandy, France, September 2010. Here's a Google map of the route and approximately 351 kilometres or thereabouts. Le Havre, Caudebec, Rouen, Giverny and Etretat. Here we are on day 1 in Le Havre, and the bike's having a quick lunch break before we get back on the road. Here we are back on the road, Normandy countryside, Normandy roads, very quiet, very flat, and very enjoyable. Here we are in the evening, arriving in Caudebec, and the view from our room, from the hotel, looking over the River Seine. In the evening we wandered around the town, looking at the cathedral and the church. And also taking into account the Normandy architecture, a lot of it was destroyed during the war due to a great fire in the town. Here we are back on the road the following morning, again cycling through the Normandy countryside. Look at those nice, fantastic quiet roads, absolutely fantastic for cycling. Coming up for lunchtime now, and arriving in Rouen, cycling along the banks of the Seine into the town, aiming for the cathedral of Notre Dame in the town centre, before we give ourselves and our bikes a quick lunch break. Saying goodbye to the cathedral before riding on to Vernon and over the Seine into the town. Following morning, cycling over to Giverny and the Claude Monet Gardens, an absolute oasis of peace. Here's the church in the village before we went into the gardens, and I'll leave you with these absolutely fantastic pictures that we took wandering around the gardens, the peace, the oasis, the tranquility of the gardens. You'll see coming up soon the famous water lilies, and also the famous bridge which was depicted in one of his great masterpieces. Then a wander around the gardens and the beautiful flowers and blooms that were on display. Then time for a quick break, giving both ourselves and the bikes a break before heading back to Le Havre, and then off to Etretat the following morning on the north coast, getting to the top of the cliff to take into a fantastic view. Here we are before we head back 30 kilometres back to Le Havre, and a quick summary of our journey. Great cycling in Normandy, 4 days, 351 kilometres approximately. Great cycling events from davidjsalmon.co.uk. Until next time, happy cycling. Welcome to Cycling with David Salmon and cycling in Normandy, September 2010. Here's a Google map of our route and the 351 approximately kilometres. Cycling from Le Havre to Caudebec, Rouen, Giverny and back to Etretat. Day 1, Le Havre. As with all things, before we got back on the road we needed a quick break, so there's our bikes having a quick lunch break, and there we are then getting back on the road through the Normandy countryside. Very flat, very quiet and absolutely fantastic for cycling. Late afternoon we arrived in Caudebec, which is on the banks of the River Seine. Here's a view from our hotel window. And in the evening we took a wander around the town and looked at the Quarterback Church and the Normandy architecture in the area. Here's just some of the Normandy architecture preserved by the church after a huge fire in the town in World War II. In the morning we're back on the road, and very quiet roads for cycling along in the Normandy countryside. It wasn't too long before we started to arrive in Rouen, and here we are cycling along the Seine towards the town centre and coming across the Cathedral Notre Dame. And yes, it was time for another bike and lunch break, and here's our bikes having a quick rest while we have some traditional lunch. Another quick look at the church before we ride off towards Vernon, a town on the banks of the River Seine. Here we are crossing the bridge, and then the following morning we're off to Giverny and the Claude Monet Gardens, an absolute oasis of peace. Here's the church. I'm just going to leave you now with a few of the pictures that we took in the tranquility and the oasis of Monet's garden. Coming up, the famous water lilies, looking absolutely fantastic. And you probably remember one of Monet's famous paintings, the water lilies and the bridge, which is just coming up right now. As you can see, absolutely beautiful. And we took a little wander around the gardens, looking at the beautiful blooms that were out that day. And then it was time for a quick break, both for our bikes and for ourselves, before we headed back to Le Havre and off to Etretat the following day. Etretat is on the north coast and gives some beautiful coastal scenery. Here we are on the top of the cliff, taking it into view. And after that, so another 30 kilometres back to Le Havre and the end of our 4 days in Normandy. For more great cycling events, have a look at davidjsalmon.co.uk. Until next time, bye for now.